Welcome to Patty for Liberty. Today I want to talk about New Mexico's deadly drinking problem. It is a problem here in this state and one that legislators are going to be talking about in their upcoming legislative session. So I've written a blog post to go with this. You can find it on my blog, pattyforliberty.com, and I'll also leave a link for that in the description. So when I moved to New Mexico, I kind of knew that Albuquerque had a high crime rate, and I watched Breaking Bad and saw about the meth problems here. So you would think that was the biggest problems going on here in New Mexico, but in reality, the biggest problem New Mexico, or one of the biggest problems New Mexico is dealing with, is our drinking problem. And I had kind of heard about the DUI problems here in the state before I moved here, but I didn't realize how much of a problem alcohol was in this state. And it's not just DUIs. This is a long-standing problem in this state. And when I moved here, I kind of discovered the alcohol culture was completely different than what I've been used to. And I've lived in a number of states. In New Mexico, you can find alcohol at any drugstore, at any gas station, at any grocery store. You can buy liquor, beer, wine on any day of the week, on Sundays. It's readily available, not like other states where there's a lot of places you can't find it. So alcohol is readily available here, and you can find it anywhere. And it's also a big problem that's costing the states billions of dollars, according to the CDC and New Mexico's Department of Health. So it's something I want to talk about, and some things you might not realize if you live in New Mexico or if you don't live in New Mexico. New Mexico has an alarming, concerning death rate from alcohol. 1 in 5 deaths in New Mexico are from alcohol-related deaths. 1 in 5. That is insane. That's a worse problem than COVID. That is a huge problem, and lawmakers are talking about how to fix this problem, and I want to discuss libertarian solutions and what the government shouldn't be doing. So we don't just have a high rate of alcohol deaths from, when I first started researching this, it was so where are these deaths happening? Are they people drunk driving? Are they people getting drunk and committing suicide? Where are all these alcohol-related deaths coming from? So what surprised me is the biggest cause of alcohol-related deaths in New Mexico is chronic liver disease. And that's because this state has a long-standing history of people having alcohol use disorders and alcoholism. And I can't delve into every aspect of this issue, but New Mexico has a very big alcohol culture here. And the alcohol problem doesn't just affect mental health. It affects every area of New Mexico. It is involved in many of the major crimes here. The violent crimes are usually there's alcohol involved. When someone commits suicide, there's alcohol involved. When there's child abuse, there's alcohol involved. When there's sexual assaults, there's alcohol involved. Children's mental health are being affected in homes with alcoholics, and homelessness. And I probably didn't even cover all the ways that alcohol and alcohol abuse is affecting people in New Mexico. And most of you that know me know that alcoholism and mental health are something I care very much about, and here in my state of New Mexico, I'd like to have an influence on people. So right now, the solutions that lawmakers are discussing on how to tackle the alcohol problem are probably what you'd expect. Let's raise the alcohol taxes. They have a few ideas they're tossing around that the Department of Health has mentioned, like raising the alcohol tax, and that's probably going to be coming up in the next legislative session. Limiting the number of alcohol establishments that can sell alcohol here in New Mexico, so that you can't find it on every street corner, gas station, grocery store. Limiting the number of hours, I don't know if they're going to say you can't buy alcohol after 7 or 8 or on Sundays, but those are some of the solutions. And then the only solution they had listed that I thought might actually be a viable, useful one is screening people for alcohol use disorders at clinics and community health providers. So I do think that that might be helpful, but I think doctors should start intervening in that as well when they do your well checks, asking you. However, some of the things I've seen discussed is the CDC in New Mexico says that this costs the state $2.2 billion or $1,000 per person a year. So everyone in New Mexico is bearing the burden of other people's alcohol use problems, and it's costing us $1,000 a year, according to the CDC and New Mexico's Department of Health. And that's where I started thinking to myself, initially when I started researching this, I was like, I don't believe in sin taxes. I don't believe that taxing alcoholics is going to make them quit drinking. I've lived with an alcoholic. You know what happens when you dump out their alcohol. They go get more. If you raise the taxes, they'll just go to drinking cheaper alcohol. It's not going to fix the problem. So that was my first thoughts. But then I'm like, if this is costing the state each of us $1,000 a year to take care of these problems from alcohol, wouldn't it make more sense? Wouldn't it be more fiscally responsible to do something about it? And I think that's why the lawmakers are discussing this. And so that's what's coming up soon. They're going to be discussing raising the alcohol taxes and maybe changing the hours or the number of businesses who can operate and sell alcohol. And I believe this is a bad call, and it's just going to not work. I believe it will just cause people to spend more money on their alcohol problem, and it's not going to do very much to keep people from becoming alcoholics or to change people who are already dealing with an alcohol use disorder. I think that what will happen is it will harm small business owners who sell alcohol, the drugstores, the grocery stores, the restaurants, who make money from this industry, and they're not doing anything wrong. Responsible business owners and their employees are going to end up being affected, and I don't think it's going to do anything to help curb the alcohol problem here. So one of the things I looked into when researching this, because they're saying this costs $1,000 a year per person. So I try to find where these numbers came from. Like, where did they come from? It's listed on the CDC. I have a link to that in my blog post on Patty for Liberty. But I couldn't find specific breakdown on how this is costing New Mexico, even with the presentation that the New Mexico Department of Health gave to legislators. But I did find a report from the CDC on how excessive drinking costs the state or the country, I believe they said $149 billion or $249 billion excessive drinking cost the country. And what the breakdown said was that 72% of this was from lost workplace productivity. And that's if that's where the bulk of the cost to New Mexico is coming from, lost workplace productivity, that's something that employers can easily address. Your drinking problems affecting your job, you don't work here anymore. The majority of it wasn't going towards health care or crime, criminal justice, like stopping DUIs or from motor vehicle crashes. Most of the money was lost in workplace productivity. So with all this in mind, I really started thinking, so what is the libertarian solution to this? What do I tell people? We just do nothing? Because there's clearly a problem here in New Mexico with the culture of drinking. But as someone who's watched the government try to fix cultural problems, mental health issues, and do it terribly, horribly, and very expensively and still not fix anything, I don't think the government can or should be fixing the problem of alcohol in the state of New Mexico. And if we do any sort of efforts in that, I believe education is the solution, the key to changing culture. Education, not legislation, and not taxation. If you've watched how we've shifted our cultural and societal norms on smoking, when we were growing up, or I don't know how old everybody is watching, but when I was growing up, smoking was socially acceptable. You could smoke on airplanes, you could smoke in restaurants, and nobody thought you were gross and disgusting if you smoked cigarettes. Your mom and dad would send you to the store to go buy them. And now everyone thinks smoking is disgusting if you're under the age of 40 or you don't like smoking. And we've done that without we've done that through education, and I think that's where we solved the problem here in New Mexico. And another big issue, and I am going to hold New Mexico parents accountable for this, because this is where the problem comes from. Problems like alcoholism and drug substance abuse often start in adolescence, and New Mexico ranks #1 in the country for children who start drinking before the age of 13. Before the age of 13, okay? I'm not a Karen. I did a poll on my Facebook before on how many people waited till they were 21 to start drinking, and the answer was 5%. I'm one of the few people that didn't start drinking till I was 19. But I also grew up around the AA program, so I'm pretty educated on alcoholism. So in New Mexico, we rank highest in the country for underage drinking. Our kids start drinking at 13 years old, and it's perfectly acceptable, I believe, in many of the families here in New Mexico. It's a cultural thing. We drink together. We think we'd rather you start drinking at home when I'm here to watch you. And I somewhat share that belief that I'd rather see kids, if they're drinking at home, be with their parents. But it is a felony in New Mexico to serve your kids alcohol, to serve your kids' friends alcohol. But I don't think that's changing anything. Kids start drinking here before the age of 13. 51% of the kids in New Mexico started drinking before they were 13 years old. This is according to Safer New Mexico. And that's where the problem starts. What I would say is that we don't have a drinking problem. We have a parenting problem. And now we're asking the government to be our parents. If you live in New Mexico and want to change the culture here, start being outspoken about when children should start drinking. When you're friends and you socialize, don't drink with kids that are underage. That's where it starts. I can't be everybody's police, but I can say that nobody drinks responsibly at 12 and 13, and nobody needs to be drinking at 12 and 13. I won't dictate how parents raise their kids, but I do think the biggest solution to the drinking culture in New Mexico is to stop letting our kids drink at 13 years old. And we do that. We do that as a culture, as a society, as speaking up, as being a responsible resident here in New Mexico. We are responsible for raising our children and making New Mexico a great state to live in. And if we want to see something done about the drinking problem and drinking culture here in New Mexico, it starts with us. And we can't pass that burden on to the New Mexico legislator. So that's my thoughts on how to tackle this problem. I think it is a significant problem, and I do see why New Mexico lawmakers are saying, hey, we got to do something about this. But I think it's going to be a bad move to raise taxes. I think it's going to hurt the wrong people, and it's not going to solve the problem at all. I would really love to hear from New Mexican people. I have a lot of you on my friends list, and I'm new to the state, so I don't know the culture history here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think parents can flip the culture of heavy drinking here? What do you think the problem is, and what do you think legislators should be doing? I'm really curious, because it is a quandary when you see your state is spending so much money on treating people for alcoholism and it not getting better. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the right way for government to solve this problem, and whether or not you think that New Mexico's government should be solving this. So thank you guys for tuning in to Patty for Liberty. I'm trying to make unique content that's interesting to my friends in New Mexico and libertarians across the country. If you like my content, if you support me, please hit the like button, leave me a comment, and subscribe to my channel. I've left all the information for how to get to my blog post in the description, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this issue.